What's up everyone, welcome to Drummer's Perspective. My name is Ben Todd and I'm here to help broaden your scope of what's possible as a drummer. Thanks so much for tuning in today, whether you're watching here on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast. I really appreciate you wherever you're coming in from. If you are here on YouTube though, please subscribe to the channel. That really does help me out and it lets you know next time I got a video coming out. Now today I had a super fun time chatting with a really good buddy of mine, Mr. Kit Chatham. Now, if you know anything about Cirque du Soleil, and more specifically the drumming and percussion side of it, you know that Kit is an absolute legend in this world. He's been a part of 4 different creations for Cirque shows, where he was involved from day one, coming up with some of the drum and percussion parts for these shows, as well as working on the sounds, the instruments used, and in some cases, developing the character and on-stage acts in some specific shows. As well as this, he's just such an incredibly versatile drummer and percussionist, having a really authentic sound on everything from conga to tabla, to doumbek, to bodhrán, to mallets, to pipe band drumming, rudimental snare drumming, drum set playing. He's just over so much. And you'll hear in this conversation his approach to versatility and why it's been so beneficial to him in his career. Now, in this chat, we talk about a bunch of different things, everything from his experience with Cirque to how he got that gig in the first place, his educational experience and how he developed as a player in school and then after school, as well as just hearing some absolutely incredible advice and real-world experience for anyone who's interested in touring with large-scale shows for an extended period of time. Kit's just had close to 20 years of touring experience playing on this level, so I know that there's going to be a bunch of really useful and tangible advice and information in there for you, all you guys and girls out there. So I think that's enough chatting for now. Thank you again for tuning in. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Mr. Kit Chatham. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to offer you a free gift, and today that's my 7 Ways to Attract More Work as a Drummer PDF guide. If you feel like you're working on all the right stuff, you're seeing improvement in your playing, perhaps you're actually quite established in your local music scene, but still you're not working just as much as you would like to, then this guide is perfect for you. Here I offer you 7 ways to reapproach your development and your progression as a drummer and offer you a fresh perspective on some things you might be able to change in your development to hopefully bring in a little bit more work. The best thing about this guide is that only one of the tactics involves picking up a pair of drumsticks at all. So if you're feeling a little stuck, frustrated, and tired of not being able to be out there working and playing more, then please head to drummersperspective.com/7ways and grab that free downloadable PDF guide right now. Kit Chatham, thanks so much, man, for taking some time today to chat with me on the podcast. Man, it's been a long time since we've seen each other, but I'm super happy this is happening. So thanks again.
Oh, my pleasure. I do anything for you, bro. So
cool.
Glad I could catch back up with you and chat with you for sure.
Yeah. It's been, a long time, but we've got like a lot of history, especially with Cirque. Like you were the first guy that I took over from when I joined back in 2009. And then we got the chance to actually work together on the same show on Kuza for a while, which was super fun.
That was a lot of fun, yeah.
Yeah, but man, I remember like when I got that gig with Corteo and they sent me all the music to learn and recordings and stuff, and I'm listening through, I'm like, man, I got a lot of work to do. This guy is all over it, like, because it wasn't just a drum set thing, it was like all the congas and djembe and doumbek and on stage stuff. And I was like, the thing that struck me the most, I think, was like, firstly, like your versatility is something I've always like admired and respected and kind of like, you know, pushed myself to be like for so long. But it was so authentic as well, you know, like there's a lot of percussionists, a lot of drummers that can play like, you know, a bit of congas, a bit of, you know, tambourine, whatever, but the way you play that stuff, like you can really tell you have such a deep understanding of all those instruments. So yeah, man, I just want to say thank you.
So do I Venmo you? Do I Venmo you now the money?
No, man, not at all. No, man, not at all. It's like it really gave me like a huge push back in those early days to be like, man, I got a lot of work to do, but it really yeah, it put me on a path of like just working on that stuff as much as I could and trying to, you know, do your parts justice and respect as much as I could. So yeah, man, thank you again for that. But I maybe I just want to start there. Like, where did your like love and desire and passion to learn all of those instruments come from? Like, was that something that kind of you picked up in high school or college, or where'd that start?
It actually started off in middle school. Okay. So my brother, who's a good bit older than me, was in college studying with a really versatile percussionist. He's still in Atlanta, still one of the top-notch guys. He's teaching at a university there. But he would bring home all these instruments. The first instrument was like a ballroom. And I was like, what, you know? And even younger than middle school, I used to sneak into his room because that's where the drums were. And I'd, you know, tinker around. But once he started bringing these instruments home, so he was in college by the time I was in middle school. And I was like, wow, what is that? So I kind of sparked the competitive edge, you know? I was like, oh, he's playing that. And then knowing, you know, we used to, my parents bought us boxing gloves because we used to duke it out, just, you know, fun. So it was like that one thing. I was like, all right, he's playing that. All right, well, I'm going to work on it so I can play it better than him. And a lot of it was like self-exploration, because there weren't too many people at all back then who were into a lot of world stuff. I mean, now you see it all over the place, but back then there wasn't. So I had to do a lot of digging of VHS. I mean, this is before the internet, man. So I was ordering books, I was getting videos, and I was just trying to pick up. And a lot of it was just like really sitting and watching and analyzing people. So that bit of it started in high school. And then in college, I kept branching out. I always liked to get an instrument, I'd play around with it, try to tinker with it. And then, you know, me trying to honor that instrument, I would dive into it and be like, all right, how do you actually play this? Or like, I don't want to be so much of a poser, but I want to actually be respectful, but then I also want to, you know, be able to create whatever sounds I can out of it. So that started me off on a path where I was just like, when I found something, I respected the traditions and the origins, but then I also was like, well, what else can I do with it to make it sound, you know, sound funky and cool, you know? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it started at an early age. And even when I was in college, there wasn't really anyone interested in tabla, or ballroom was my first, you know, instrument. And I'm still learning a lot more today, because I learned a particular style, and a few years back, about 7 or 8 years ago, I really got more into top end playing. So like, I'm, you know, like us all, man, I'm still learning, I'm still working on things. So, but yeah, to go back to, so I, middle school, high school, I got more into like, you know, African and Latin stuff. I used to go to some African hand drumming classes in Atlanta. So that's, again, kept me going. In college, you know, my professor, he really didn't teach, you know, anything world. He was a steel drum, you know, that was his one big thing that was kind of ethnic. So got a bit of that, but everything else was, man, just like me, you know, doing self-exploration and figuring out stuff and whatnot. So yeah, it started early. And I guess thanks to me wanting to be better than my brother is kind of what kept me driving to do it, you know?
Man, whatever it takes. But that I mean, that's amazing that you were able to kind of realize at that early age, like there was so much out there, you know, because I think like you say, we're all still discovering and still learning, but it takes like someone who's really switched on to realize like that there's a big world out there of things to grasp and kind of learn and respect. But I was wondering, like, when you were working on that stuff, was it obviously over a very long period of time, but did you find yourself going through like focused I don't know, like chapters of like being in like, you know, conga world, and then now I'm in tabla world, and now I'm, you know, diving in, or was it just everything kind of coming in?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, you know, and one, because of financially, I mean, I just couldn't get things, you know, I had to work and save money to like buy these instruments. And every now and then, since my brother was a percussionist, you know, at Christmas time, he'd feed my parents to be like, get this for Christmas, you know, and they'd be like, oh, look, I got a berimbau, sweet, you know, you know, so, awesome. So yeah, there are definitely stages where like, you know, I would focus just on, you know, the different stages of like, all right, this is the tabla stage, and there were, you know, little bitty chunks of time, and then I would kind of do like a circular motion where I kind of go back, but yeah, I would get really super focused on one thing, and then especially when I got a new instrument and like wanted to learn about it, like I think I didn't get into like darbuka and doumbek until like in college. So that was one of those things where I was like, oh, because that's when I got into Glenn Velez, going to PAS. That was once I got into college. That's when I got to go to PAS and explore. And we had actually even had PAS in Atlanta back in '94. So I mean, I got to go and just immerse myself in this world of percussion, and like me, like I'm a kid in the candy store because that time I'm still in high school, and I'm like going, now I'm telling you my age.
That's I'll edit that out.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, man.
Beep it out and be like, man, kid is using some language. Anyway, but it's one of those things where I'd go and be like, ooh, what is this? What is this? And I'd make my wish list of things to buy. But you're absolutely right, man. There were stages, I think, and two, since I was the only one in college who did that stuff, I was the one called to play, like in the, when we did jazz band, we went and toured all the jazz festivals in Europe, and they're like, hey, Kit, we need a conga player. You're the only one around in the school that plays it, So I'm like, all right, let's go, and they knew I could cover drum set as well, So like there was this little bit where, and what's funny is the thing that sacrificed the most during that was my drum set playing, because I started out drum set. That was my kind of like my thing, and of course we both have a mutual rudimental like marching kind of history. That was always there because it was there from school. I had to do it every year. We did Lime, so that was always there. But going back, drum set was one of those things where it kept taking a seat back, and of course and that was one of the things in college where we had your proficiency exams and whatnot, where I would pull out and play drum set again. It's kind of like riding a bike, but then there were times when I was like, okay, the competitive nature of me in college was like, all right, this guy who's 4 years my elder in college, he's the number one guy in the jazz band. I want to beat him out, So I'm like, now, so I got to sneak this in. All that would, it's crazy when I look back, things that I wish I would have prioritized better in terms of like, man, I practiced this a lot and I don't play it hardly at all anymore, but I get,
and then right?
Yeah. And it's, I'm glad I did it. I would not change a thing, but I was like, man, if I had those 8 hours there to put maybe 2 hours here and 2 hours, and prioritize or 4 and 4, that would have, okay, man, that would have been so much better. But, like marimba, anytime I go to a college and do like a master class, I'm like, because I have a set of vibes right here, but I don't have a marimba, and I'll go, but sit and I'll try and tinker around and be like, all right, let me pull out this stuff that I played in my recitals in college, and I'm like, but it's just like one of those things where like, I don't do that much of it now. So it's like, looking back, it's like, I love doing it, but maybe I would have been more beneficial for me to do something else. So yeah, man, that whole prioritization of like, when learning, it's crazy. And I tell people like, there's one thing where I would prioritize like something that if I want to do as a career, or something that I do as a hobby and what I love. Because I have friends that are now teaching college and they love marimba more than anything. And I'm like, that's great. You love it, you teach it, you share it. That's great. Trying to like fill your crayon box together and get all those different sounds and colors. Sorry, I think my internet connection or something might be a little.
I think it went a little funky there. It's okay. We're back. Yeah.
All right,
cool,
we're back. Anyway.
Yeah. So you mentioned something there which I want to like come back to maybe at the end, and that's just like getting a grasp of a lot of different instruments kind of all at once, and the people that are really into that, and some advice that you might have, but also you said about like the drumline thing, which I think I've spoken to you about it in the past, but we don't really have like high school drumline as a standard thing here in Australia like you have in the States. And I think it's such an amazing thing that's built into the kind of music education in the US. It's like an incredible foundation for so many players. But like we've talked about this, like that transition from like drumline to drum set, and the application of the different techniques that you learn in drumline, and how to adapt them to use them the best way. Like because there's a lot of incredible stuff that you obviously learn there, but if it's not like transferred the right way, it can end up like hindering your drum set playing. So I want to talk about that. Like how did you go about like adapting those drumline techniques you learned to like drum set playing?
I really think that it had a lot to do with me being very involved in the world stuff, and digesting all these different rhythms. Because the one really good thing about marching band, and we start in high school, and then if you're like me, you do it in college, and you teach in college, and you teach drum corps. It's really about conformity. It's really about like making sure that you're playing very quantized and very controlled and stuff. So it makes a lot of players play within a box, and you work so hard to be able to have consistent everything. It's very robotic. You're like, okay, I want to make sure. Even to the point when I was younger, and things have changed quite a bit. There's a lot of new playing, which I love seeing, because like you see a lot more flow, you see a lot more involvement with different parts of the muscles. But back, early on when you're teaching, just like you teach fundamentals, you start with the small muscles. All right, I'm not going to incorporate that because you're incorporating multiple variables. So everything's very controlled and very boxed. And a lot of times that translates year after year after year. And a lot of people who learn these very fast technical drumming things, they can't break that box and get into drum set world or whatever. And I teach that a lot with people, and being able to, all right, you're playing a 16th note time rhythm and you want it to sound Brazilian, but you're saying da, 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 da. How do you get that flow? I mean, so much of it is just digesting the music and singing it. All my students, even when I started taking tabla, I apply this to my students, where you have to sing everything. You got to sing everything, because that makes sure that this guy right up here, your brain is and this are all in line, so that way you can transfer it. So a lot of times I'll have them, you want to play it, as opposed to when you learn it rhythmically in marching band, you're like and it's you're like da 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 da, and it's the even spaces, and you don't even get to understand that a lot of rhythms in a lot of other countries. And I remember when I was teaching in London at the Royal Military Academy, I mean, it was awesome seeing how they interpreted certain things, because it wasn't so quantized, overly quantized. It had a little breath and stuff. And even when you get into some of the ancient American drumming, where you have like a lift roll, you're like, wow. So it's definitely taking it to a whole new world, where things are, again, so robotic, so controlled, that it really stifles a lot of like players. And I mean, a lot of it doesn't translate well to drum set. You get back when you play drum, like when you play drum set, what works well? Flams work, but even flams, you interpret it a little bit different, because you want a little more body. You don't want it to be super, super tight. Like rolls, you keep them old, like 6-stroke rolls, but like a lot of the flam drags and like hurtas, and you can do on drum set, and like, but it's you got to find the certain things that work in the vocabulary that transfers over. And because you hear, I know you can tell when you sit down and listen. I don't know how it is in Australia, but here in America, when I sit down and I listen to a drummer, and I can say, oh, he's a drum corps guy, or he's a drumline guy, because it's very stiff, it's very controlled, and it doesn't have that kind of breathability and motion in the body. It's very tight. It's very tight, and that's what's taught, and it's taught because it's easier to get that at a high level, as opposed, again, what I talked about before, adding all these multiple variables. Once you add that, you're adding like, well, this guy's not lifting his arm exactly the same way as that person, or getting so what we do is we minimize those points of motion. So yeah, I mean, I could chat about this for hours. It's just one of those one of those things where it's like, and it's hard to break. I mean, there are times when I have students, and like it's funny when you finally see the spark, when it does happen, but it's like, so much of it is just broken when I was like, all right, sing it to me. No, sing it exactly what you hear, and I'll play it, and I'm like, now you sing it to me. All right, and I'll sing it to you. Or whatever. And I'm like, now you sing it. And I'm like, no. That was one thing from my tabla teacher. He was like, whenever I would say dot, there we go. He's like, you're not just going to say it. You have to emote it. You have to like get into it. I mean, that's the way where you're actually going to, he's like, when you're first learning, you can be like reciting just so that you can digest the vowels and whatnot. But like, where you get into it, like really singing, you're like, it's not just like, and he wouldn't allow me to play until I was like, oh, I get into it. So I took away from that. And I was like, that's huge, because like I do that in my drum set playing. I know watching YouTube, we're and I keep, one of the highlights of being in Cirque was like when we got to play together, because we had a language,
Yeah.
But I mean, I know like it's just the way our faces and the way like, I would, people look at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm singing the part, this is the way I am, man.
Man, that's huge. I mean, like, I know it was a very broad question, like adapting drumline techniques to drum set, but it's just something that I think you've been able to do it so well, like make that transition, and use the skills that, like I said, that you learned in drumline to like the best way possible, and recognizing the things that work and recognizing the things that don't work, and kind of skimming that out. And
a lot of it, man, a lot of it all can work. It's just a matter of like, putting a little, it's like a rubber band, like keeping it tight. I was like, you got to let it loose a little bit so it can have a little more flow. And that's exactly what with drum set. It can't be like, it has to flow. And not to say that that's not perfect and right. And people who've done it really, really well, man. I look at like Chad Smith from 311. He's a drum corps guy, and you listen to some of his tracks, and you watch him play, and he's like that. But when you listen to it, you're like, oh man, that's awesome. So there are players out there who make it happen. But so, most of the time when you get there, they're just so tight that it affects their playing. That tension from all your body, no matter what, and that control. And a lot of it's like letting the sticks breathe in your hand too. Like, I think we've talked to quite a bit of us when we were together on Kuza about, like the way I hold the stick is like, man, I drop the stick all the time when I'm playing, because I'm really just thinking about letting it breathe into my hand. And like, when I need to use this fulcrum right here, I'll use it. But most of the time I'm usually just, I tell people like either like a Spider-Man, where I don't have this finger clamping down on it into my palm so it's tight, and I don't have this pushing real tight so that it's also not moving. So it's like one of those things where like, if I need to bring it in, I will. And that's that drum line, drum line, they'll usually teach you like, all right, this is where everything's from. It's that and wrist, and that's it. But it's, we understand that, we don't play in a drum line anymore. I play by myself. So all those things where like I was taught, I have to do this. I tell people, I'm like, all right, that box that you're in, I'm about to explode it, because I want you to just get in the habit of not thinking of like, so robotic and so technical. I want you to breathe, and I want you to, so it's a tough thing, man.
That's huge. There's a lot there. My gosh. I guess that the thing that you've been able to like maintain it as well, to the degree where you can still like, if you do needed to, you could go teach drumline still, so it's all in there. But like what you do, like you say, on a day-to-day basis now in your gig is just like use the best parts of it. But I want to kind of ask now, like career-wise, like you've done some incredible stuff, like with Blast and with Cirque, obviously. And these are kind of gigs where you've gotten the chance to like utilize a lot of the skills that you learnt, like as a percussionist, different instruments and things like that. Was that kind of always a focus for you, or like a desire to get into a gig where you could utilize all that stuff, or were you kind of ready to like hone in on anything if the opportunity came up?
It was, man. When I got the gig for Blast, I was on my way to grad school. So I wasn't, and with Blast, I happened immediately after or while I was graduating from college. And I just had a buddy, Dave Cox, who came up to me. He's like, hey, and we had a friend that was in the school that had did the Blast, the London show, the original show. So he came back, Alex McDonald, and he told us all about it. And we saw the videos, and we're like, wow, that's cool that you're able to mix all this stuff together. And like, so it could, and then next thing I know, Dave comes up to me. He's like, hey, they're auditioning for like touring shows and stuff like that. And like, would you be interested? I was like, yeah. I'd already had my tape ready for grad school. I already sent it out, and I kind of already had it accepted at a graduate. I kind of pissed some people off with that. I was like, oh, by the way, I'm not coming to your school.
Oops.
Man. Well, first I pissed the other school off. I was like, oh, by the way, I'm not going to your school. I'm going to this school. All right. Well, you kind of know. And then I was like, oh, by the way, I can always go back to school, but I want to go do this gig. And it, man, just through, I think so when we got to Blast, I was kind of like learning the marimba solo and like trying to do that, but they'd already had the guy that they picked for, like cherry picked for that, who's you know, amazing. So they're, hey, would you learn it? And I was like, yeah. And then Paul Rennick came to me, and I don't know how familiar his name is in Australia, but an amazing teacher. So anybody who follows drum corps, he's been teaching at Santa Clara for like the past few years. He wins drums all the time. It's because he's a great teacher and he's a great mentor. You know, he's one of those guys that I would jump in front of a car for him. You know, because he and I was only with him for such a short time, and even the concepts that I learned from him, I was like mind blowing. But when we were at Blast, he was like, "Hey, I hear you you play snare drum really well, and from your video, you're a snare drummer." He's like, "Hey, we need soloists." So because we were thinking about this guy and this guy who's from drum corps, you know, Naoki Ishikawa and Jeff Spanos were the two. Like they're like they marched drum corps their whole life, but they're like, "Hey, we have another cast that we're thinking about doing," and I'm like, "Would you do it?" I was like, "Yeah." So I quickly riffed out a solo, and I guess a lot of it comes down to the versatility of like what I spent in college. It was allowed me to do that. And then the theatrics, I think the theatrics came probably because I did a lot of that earlier on. I studied dance when I was a kid. I did a lot of theater in either church or in even school. So a lot of that translated. I was comfortable. I'm a very introvert extrovert, you know, because like, you know, I'm real quiet but when I'm on stage, I'm a completely different person. But yeah, so they got me to do that. So, and I did, and he's like, "All right, we want you to do a snare solo for Blast." And it ended up being me and Aaron Guitry, the two pairs. And Aaron, who's now in Miss There. So we're and we both done multiple shows with Cirque. So it's kind of crazy how our journey has kind of interwoven a little bit. But but we were the two soloists, which is odd because everyone at Blast was like drum corps background, and me and Aaron both never marched. I mean, I taught drum corps, but I never marched. It was one of those things where like going back to the story where like I was able to play congas on all the European jazz festivals. The one year I was going to march drum corps, Steve Dance came to me. He's like, "Hey, would you want to go and play at all these, you know, Montreux, Vienne, North Seas?" And like, I was like, "Well, I was going to march drum corps. I could either pay to go do that." Yeah. Or make, yeah, I'll go, you know? So and I regretted it a lot, but I think also not doing drum corps also helped me not really suffer that box or what we talked about earlier. But even when I was teaching it, you know, I was really talking about advanced concepts about playing, but I wasn't trying to get them to be so boxy and playing. But yeah, man, so there wasn't really a plan of like, "Oh, this was what I want to do." It just happened, you know? And then from Blast, I did the show Cyber Jam in London for a bit, and we knew it was closing. And then while I was in Blast, and I'll say this because I owe it to him, I had a roommate. When we all went down to Florida here in Orlando, we came down to start working on the show. I had a roommate called, his name was Paul Bannerman. And I know you've met Paul Bannerman. Yeah. I know you met him when he was. So we were roommates. And like, you know, and it ended up is that he was there to play drum set for Blast. But then there was a issue with his visa, and Blast wasn't really at a point where they could manage it. So he just had to leave. And then we still kept in touch. And last thing we knew, like not far off, he got the gig for Verikai. And then I remember once he got the gig, he was like, "Kit, you need to come and play the show." And we'd already seen Lanuba when it was here, and I saw the different music, and I was like, "Man, I would love to do this show." You know, for sure. And what's funny is that I'm playing in that theater now, and like I said, I was telling you, "Hey man, Ben, I'm going to be late, man, because I'm like coming back from 2 shows. I gotta pick up some Taco Bell and like grub on it, but so I owe him for that. So and then I've been very fortunate where like to join creations where Cyber Jam was a creation. So I got to basically infuse a lot of my talents into, or what I did into the role. Same as like you experienced in Corteo. Luckily we got into the role, and the composers were like, they give the music, and back then that was just a demo. And I was like, "Well, hey, what if you think about me doing this on it? Hey, what do you think about me doing this on it?" And they're like, "Okay." And they were very open to like adding all this world elements on top of what already was kind of there. And So that's what created Corteo's book, you know. And Viva Elvis was, I still work with, you know, one of the arrangers for that show. They were very wanting to use your talents and infuse what you do to help. Man, any composer would be smart to be like, all right, you're really good at this. You're good at this. I want you to like to help, and it makes my music look good, you know.
Yeah.
So all the creations, I was, you know, fortunate to be able to like infuse a good bit of myself. Curious, probably not as much, just to be honest, it's not as much because I was locked down the drum set for a bit, but I did get to help create the opening act, you know, and like have a big feature. Here was a little bit different too. Like it was, you know, every show's, you know, different. It's more drum set, but there are a couple of times where I get to go on stage and do my normal kit stuff. But yeah, it's hard. And, you know, a lot of it's just making sure that they're kind of aware of what you can contribute, and then your willingness to contribute, even if they say no, and be like, hey, you know, because you know, at the bottom line is like, I'm only here to help make your music good, and you know, and help, you know, make the show better, you know. And if I can do that by contributing what I love to do, it's like a win-win. So and I've had many people
awesome, man.
Yeah, and I've had many people say, no, we don't want that. That's cool, you know. I mean,
Fine.
it's, you know, it's the reality of you know, the bigger picture of what the show is, and you're like, all right, no, completely cool.
And it's an interesting thing to kind of reflect on. Obviously, like when you are involved in the creation process and you're, you know, presenting all of these ideas, different instruments and playing techniques and things like that, you're doing it from like helping the music first. But then like long term, once you actually get into the gig, like it keeps things like interesting and fun, you know, like if the book is varied, you know, if you've got a whole bunch of different things that you can like consistently work on and keep you challenged and not kind of be in a lane where like you're just doing like one thing. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but like, you know, if you are given the opportunity to like to create a varied and versatile book, that's great, you know, because it's great for the music and it's great for you like long term. So yeah, man. And I want to actually ask you like what you were just saying then about like your on stage stuff, because I think anyone that's like seen you in a show like knows what I'm talking about when I say like it's incredible the energy and character that you bring to those kind of moments that you get to have on stage. And yeah, you mentioned before, money. Like, it's true though, man. It's true.
Okay. No, I appreciate it, man. I know.
Yeah, man. But it's like, I didn't actually know that you like had you know studied dance and theater when you were younger. So I was gonna ask like, where did that come from? Because like that for me especially was a very challenging thing to kind of open up myself for, that kind of you know, workshopping when I got the Corteo gig and working with dance, you know, teachers and instructors and movement coaches and that kind of thing. But for you, it just seems so like natural, you know, like so where did that really come from? Was it like the blast thing that like helped kind of encourage that, or?
The blast thing definitely helped me get out of my shell, because even at the first bit, like I would actually get out and dance and sing on stage in front of, you know, and if you probably know this from working together, I'm not afraid of like falling flat on my face doing something, you know, and I'll be the first to get up and laugh at myself and be like, but you got to be able to take, but I do think being kind of just involved in it at an early age, it really helped me like kind of break a lot of that. I mean, when I was in dance class as a young kid, I was like a 10-year-old kid in a class, bunch of 15, 16-year-old girls, and I was the only boy. So when you're doing across the floors with a, you know, a bunch of, which I'm not complaining about at the time, you know, but it was like when you're a young kid and you're having to get out of your comfort zone. I mean, you're kind of having to break that stuff. So definitely breaking that early on and then doing it, you know, repetitive. I think that made it kind of easy to like, okay, get out there. Definitely like what I did, and it's been, you know, what I did with Blast and then transferred over to Cyberjam and then Cyberjam to Corteo, it definitely grew. And with what I was comfortable doing and what I was, you know, not afraid to explore in terms of body movement and whatnot. And so, yeah, I mean, as much as I hated it, man, I ended up like So I remember doing it for a bit, and I remember going to my parents and be like, "Yeah, I kind of want to quit." But instead of quitting dance, I ended up transferring. This is again going to age me. I got over to breakdancing, so I got like
Wow.
starting. I know. So that was like when that was the whole thing. So yeah, I think all that kind of helped again. Just make it so I'm a more comfortable. There's nothing like so. My dad was a preacher. My mom was a music minister. So I was nothing will scare you more than like getting in front of a whole congregation and having to sing a solo when that's
Wow.
one of the things you're the least comfortable about. Because that is like I don't feel like I have a bad voice, but I'm not always comfortable singing in front of people. If I'm singing in the background or blending in choir, that was but knowing that my mom was the music minister, I had, there were times where she's like, all right, I have a thing planned for you to sing in front. I'm like, really? Really? You're going to do this to me? He's like, you're like, come on. And it still happens, man. Like, so a little side story. When I was with Curious, we were in Toronto and the PR lady comes to me and she's like, Kit, you're American. And I was like, you're right, I am American. she was like, I hear you played baseball as a kid. And I was like, you're correct. I played baseball as a kid. Where's this going? And she was like, we're going to do the first pitch at the Blue Jays games. And we thought that you should do it. And I was like, what? They're like, you're the only one who has any experience throwing a ball in the entire cast. And I was, or like that. And I was like, that was, so again, getting out of your comfort zone. That was the most nervous I've been in years. Years. So you have like 20,000 people around you, and your job is to take a baseball, and throw it 60 feet and make sure it just doesn't bounce and, that in the catcher's glove. Man, I was so nervous. And I was like, man, I could come out here and play a solo in front of all these guys musically and not sweat. Well, I would have, you'd have those natural jitters, but I wouldn't be like shaking and freaking out. Like I was backstage. I remember it vividly because that was the day that Prince died. So, and that was when I was like, oh, great. And I'm like, oh, this is just keep adding on stuff to me. I was bad enough. I got to throw this ball. But I mean, it shows you that like, if you're comfortable doing something, like if I was a kid doing that all the way up to baseball, I wouldn't have sweat. But doing that thing for the first time, and I practiced for it. I didn't go out there cold, and luckily I did okay. I didn't bounce it. It was a strike. He had to go a little to the right, but I was like, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, take it.
And they asked me to do it again in my hometown in Atlanta, and I was like, oh my gosh. So that was a little more nerve wracking because it was but anyway, it just goes to show that like I wasn't comfortable with that. It was something that they were asking me to do that I was just not. I hadn't had the time, the chops, or to develop that. So I was nervous as hell, man. I was freaking out.
Wow, I think like that's a really interesting point you bring up though of just starting your development with a certain skill at a young age. Like I feel like that's so such a like useful piece of advice because when you get older, as you know, like your time to like work on new things and really like dive into new things just like gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So I was going to ask like what advice you would have to people who want to work on the on like having more stage presence and energy, but I think it kind of like ties on to really any skill, which is like if you do have even just the slightest interest in it at a younger age, whatever it might be, like dive into it because I sound like an old man, but like like the older you get, you just get less time to get into that stuff. So that's really cool.
I don't know if you guys have the American office over there, but it's like I think of Michael Scott going to improv class or something like that. You need like classes like that get you out of your comfort zone to where you're trying new things and you're like, all right, you're a cat. What are you what do you do? I don't know, but like you have to get out and some people have it naturally, and I won't claim that. I just feel like I worked at it from a young age. I mean, I do think like I with dance and certain things, I felt like I got it pretty easily because of the natural rhythm that I had. Like, so but still, even then, I was like to explore. When I was doing Blast, I had an acting coach, George Penny, who would work with me for hours on just a snare drum solo. And I'm like, I'm doing a snare drum solo. And he's like, hey, do this, but you're acting. I don't want you to act. And I'm like, what? yeah, of course I'm acting. I'm like, don't act. He's like, no, I want it to be genuine. And this is something that I tell people that like replaced me on like, on gigs and stuff. I'm like, I infuse me into the roles. So if you're trying to infuse me as you infuse me, it's not going to work. Just the way we move and how we communicate, it's different. I was like, the quicker that you can find you and express that and build upon that, it's the best way to go. You're being genuine. That's the other thing too. Like you're not fake smile, like. So it's one of those things where like and a lot of people have different methods. I'm not a professional actor or a professionalist. I mean, I think what I've developed is playing well on stage with movement. But one lesson, and I got this from Paul Rennick, and I tell this to musicians in the band that play all the time, is like, no matter what we're doing in terms of movement, as soon as that movement starts to affect our playing, then we need to reel it back. Because what are we there first for? We're there to produce the music. And I can do all this crazy stuff but once it starts affecting my playing, or if I can't do it like 98 times out of 100 that way, then maybe I need to reel it back and then dial it down. Because I mean, you'll see a lot of people like moving around and like you listen to them play and you're like, yeah, okay, you're playing suffering. Yeah. So I'm totally aware of that, and like and I push the limits. There are times I'm like, all right, let's see what I can do. Goofing around or whatever, doing but then you find those moments when you're not playing. That's when it gets back to like just like playing space. There's times when I'm not playing that I can play that space with like motion. Like if I'm playing a drum set part. I can play that space and make it look big, even though when I'm not really playing hard, There's a lot of, again, we can, that's like a whole other hour thing of like, techniques of like how I do when I play, or like with the stick, or like what I do to control to make sure, like even when I'm coming down, I'm not jamming, like playing like a soft backbeat, loud backbeat, soft backbeat, loud backbeat, or something like that.
Yeah. Man, that's so true, because, it's obviously a skill in itself to do that. Like I think a lot of people, when they want to like look like they're having more fun, quote unquote, like they just play louder, but it's not that at all, man. It's just like it's a completely different motion. Yeah,
because the physics is still, you're not going to beat physics, and like they said, like if you're going to try to do a big motion and not being able to like at least break it or caress it, I mean, it's going to be loud, just because the amount of velocity that you're creating, the amount of energy that you're creating, it's going to be a loud note. And we all know what happens then. It's things start to distort, things start to peak, and like, so you still have to have an ear for like, all right, okay, I was a little too loud on that crash, that's when self-realization, you're like, well, okay, kid, dial it back. That sounded like crap.
Okay, noted. Good. Move on. Cool, man. Awesome. Well, like you mentioned, there's something interesting, like being able to do something 98 times out of 100, which is tying onto something I wanted to talk to you about, which is like being on tour for a long time, or being in a show for a long period of time, and just how you go about keeping things fresh and interesting, like on a musical level, because I think like we've all got, anyone who does the kind of work like the long-term touring or show work has their own ways of doing that, but I'd love to hear your take on the things that keep you interested in and not letting things get stale.
I'm pretty sure we'll probably be on the same page about this. One thing is, outside, making sure that you have musical outlets outside of work that fulfills those things that your creative needs, those again, filling those voids that you're not going to get by playing the same music every day. Like if that's writing, if that's just working on a different instrument or whatever, or if it's just like watching documentaries and learning on stuff, whatever. You got to fill that void with something, for me, musically, that I can do. A lot of the stuff that I do, I'll work on other projects for other people. It's a little bit harder on tour, but I've done it on tour. But I usually did it with samples. I would manipulate samples and create tracks for people. Here I have my studio, so I can make stuff. So that's stuff that I do on the side. Now in the show, it's where you find these like little challenges for yourself. All right, I'm going to try and work on this technique, or I'm going to focus on making sure my backbeat is right with this the entire show. Or I'm going to make sure, these little bitty micro challenges that you try to better yourself. And even like there are times when I'm like, all right, when I do a lot of my doubles, I'm more of a heel down guy. I'm a heel down guy when it's on the main beat, but when it's on the offbeat, I'm a up. So it's like, all right, for this show, I'm going to play all heel up. So that's one of those things where like I put those micro challenges in the music, and okay, So I mean, and there's I think you kind of touched on this too, and when I was watching one of your podcasts and one of your videos, and like, you just find these little different things in the show to focus on, and that, I do the same thing. I focus. All right, I'm going to try to play this like this person plays it, but still stay within the realm of what fits the music, because side story, there's just so many drummers out there who think selfishly when it comes to music that I really try to teach them, be like, look, you're serving this music. You got to understand that we're not trying to sit here and cram notes. I tell them, I was like, look, a lot of times when people, I was like, I have the ability to play fast notes, but I'm suiting the music. I'm thinking more of a producer, of making sure how things relate to if there's a 16th note ostinato going on in a string sample, I'm not going to start playing sextuplet, fills over on top of it. So this is a conscious awareness of like things musically, and I see that all the time, and I'm like, hey man, I want to help you out, but like I don't know if you open your ears of like that, but like, so a lot of it's like not being selfish with the music, and like knowing that like I'm there. All right, I'm going to try to make this a little fatter tonight. All right, this feel like, maybe I'm going to sit back and see how that feels, and I also like to, in those challenges, I like to video myself, and I go back and watch it, and I'm like, wow, okay, Kit, what were you thinking, bro? What were you thinking about that one? I mean, it sounded okay, but like, it's not, it's like, you know how it is. Like,
of course,
I'm my harshest critic, so it's like, man, I could do that better. So the next night, I'll go back and I'll focus on that one thing and be like, all right, and then I'll get that ingrained into my playing. So like, man, you got to like have little bitty like challenges and little focus things, and also, man, like keep working on yourself. And this is one thing. And again, I'm skipping around a lot to your viewers. I remember when we first joined Kuza together. I remember walking on site, and I hear boom, bats, guns, bats, and I'm like, all right, what is it? And I'm like, and what I do, I go knock on a trailer. I'm like, hey man, I was like, and like, it was inspiring to me because like I'm one of those, I don't practice enough. I find my practices, but when I saw your dedication, your practice, I was like, wow, oh man, Kit, get your craft together, bro. Come on. No, but it's one of those things too, where like those are things that help fuel you when you're doing a repetitive thing at night. You're sitting there working on challenging yourself on other things, and that's awesome. And what is that going to do? It's just going to strengthen what you have to add and contribute to your gig. The great thing about Cirque music's very eclectic at times. There are shows like the current show that I'm on now. It's very symphonic, so it's not quite your typical Cirque. There are elements here that are kind of typical, but it's not like, it's very symphonic. So I find myself, playing more like a symphonic drum set player. But like, when you learn more and you work on things and you work on your independence and you work on all that stuff, I mean, it's just going to help, continue make you grow and contribute to the music there. I mean, the same thing happened for both of us in terms of being able to band lead a show. Being a drummer and band leading a show, you have to have a good level of independence and just, awareness of what's going on, and that comfortability of like, all right, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm not only using my four limbs, but my mouth and everything, and having to like at times do other stuff, but it's like all that added practice on the side that we're doing just to fulfill and pass the time of doing a show, 367 times a year, or here a resident show is 476 times a year. I mean, that's a lot of show.
Man, that's a lot of
show. That's how many resident shows with Cirque do 477, that's including the dress rehearsal. You do one dress rehearsal a year. So you do a lot of shows, and that's a lot of repetition. You got to, and luckily, you know, with Cirque, it's a different animal because there are different things happen night to night. So, you know, with technical or artists, like, you know, needing more time to do a trick, or like, you know, having to do a trick over. So there's all that stuff that keeps you on your toes. But no, man, I get you. That's one of the challenges that I know a lot of people have, is like, you're doing something night after night. How do you keep it fresh? And so, and that's one of those things where, like, side stuff, you know, little challenges in the music, focusing things, incorporation of different elements into the show. And I'm sure that I'm missing a bunch of things, but that's what I'm thinking off on the top of my head.
No, man, it's great. That's great. I mean, we're definitely on the same page with that. But I think it's interesting, like you mentioning, like hearing me practice and that being inspiring. I think that was one of the most incredible things about working for Cirque for such a long time, is just constantly like coming onto site every day and seeing, like, mainly the acrobats, really, like their dedication to like working on their act or their, you know, their fitness, their body, whatever it might be. You know, there's guys and girls in there like every day for hours. And like, as a musician, like, I think like we can kind of get lazy and, you know, just think like, oh, I got my stuff together, you know, do my gigs, whatever. And then you're in an environment like Cirque where you're coming in and you're just constantly reminded, like, these people are just like so dedicated. And it's like, why can't I be like that? You know, why should it be any different for me? Like, I'm doing something I love to do and I want to get better at. So like, you know, trying to apply that mentality to getting better at playing was huge for me. And I think, for you too.
I think a lot of people, like with being music, we get like, we don't think there's an end point, you know, we can, but with acrobats, there's an end point, because as I'm getting older, and I've already kind of alluded to my age, so I hope you, again, bleep that off.
Sure.
Just give me some more money. No, but we don't have a specific endpoint. They do. And as I get older, I mean, I can feel different physical challenges, you know, and curious. I was very active in dancing, and I herniated my back. And you realize, like, if you want to do like what the acrobats do for a long period of time, you have to do that. You have to invest in your body and your health and training and you know, so it's like, you're exactly right, man. It's one of those things that's inspiring to see. And I saw it when I first joined with Cirque. I was like, wow, they're doing that. And it got me to actually even try some acrobatic stuff, which that didn't last very long. But it's like, all right, but you know, it's continued growth, you know, and that's, and man, I took advantage of Cirque as much as I could. Like, whenever we were in a city and I knew of a teacher there or somebody that I wanted to study with, I'd message them ahead. I'm sure you've done the same thing. So I know, but I would, you know, I'm in Japan. All right, let me look. Okay, I can study taiko with this person, and I did it. You know, or I'm in, you know. Yeah. So it's and you find those things because you want to. I mean, also as a percussionist, I wanted to refine my skills and be true to that. But also, it's like, you know, man, I mean, we're all you know, humility is a big thing, man. I tell all my students, you know, you're never going to be the absolute best at anything. So be humble about it, but also understand that we all continue to grow and get better. So even to this day, I whether it be like I'm learning like all right, what, you know, different, you know, compression or EQ techniques that apply to my recordings to make my drums and my percussion sound the best, or whether it's not, how do I play something to make it, you know, sound the best? So there's so much stuff out there. And man, I mean, you're a good bit younger than me, but I didn't have YouTube when I was a kid, man. So I use it like crazy these days to be like, all right, you do that? Okay. I mean, man, if I was a kid and didn't have to wear out, because I remember watching Buddy Rich, Neil Peart, Drum Corps, and there's a lot of others, Giovanni Hidalgo, Steve Gadd, I would wear out those VHS tapes where like the magnetic strips were just done. You know, we're done. Wow. Because I would like, how does Buddy Rich do that? You know, the stick thing, or how does he, you know, what is he, how does his hand do it? You know, I would sit there and geek out on it, and I was like, you know.
Oh man, that's amazing. I mean, like, yeah, I kind of caught maybe the tail end of VHS, I think, like in elementary school and high school, and then like the DVD thing came, and then but
DVD
YouTube
was in
really
high school, so
yeah.
YouTube
YouTube was like, that was like late high school for me, I reckon. But still, like I know what you mean. Like just having all of that stuff at your fingertips is incredible these days. But you mentioned about like just the amount of energy that you exert on stage. Like, and I know like from working with you and knowing you, like you're really into fitness and staying healthy and all that kind of stuff as much as you can. So do you have like a specific like routine that you try and stick to, especially like in show time, like when you are doing 8 to 10 shows a week?
Well, I mean, you caught me at a bad time. As it's just like, boy, I feel the worst.
I
I've let you know, like, I'm leaving the show, and so I'm moving across the country I'm moving back to Vegas from Orlando, and transitioning to other stuff. So I've been a little stressful. I haven't worked out, but I still like I like to run is one of my big things, is because it's kind of my meditation time where I can just go and listen to some music and then just run through my thoughts through the day. Again, it's my meditation. And then of course you get that runner's high afterwards. I mean, I also do spin bike. I also do a lot of, I'm doing a lot more body weight type stuff. Like I know when we were together, I was doing a lot more heavy, like I got into heavy lifting, and then I slowly graduated because I felt like it wasn't hindering my playing, because even when I was doing that, I made sure to like stretch out and make sure that I still was very limber. I didn't want to get too bulked up, but like, no, I still work out at least 5 to 6 times a week. I ran this morning before shows. We had early shows. So, so I'm selling, since I'm moving back to Vegas, I'm selling my house here. So I was like, all right, got up, vacuumed the whole house, cause it was an open house for people to come through, and like, all right, I'm going to go for a run. And then I got to, finish and leave the house, and then I got to go do 2 shows, and then do 2 shows, and then I got to rush to Taco Bell. And do you guys have Taco Bell? I can't remember.
We don't, man. We don't.
That's why, because I was thinking, I was like, I was in the line. I was like, all right, I got to hurry because I got to get to meet Tom. I mean, Ben. I can't believe I just
happens
said
all the time. It happens all the time. It's okay.
So I was like, I got to hurry to Ben, and I was like, all right, and I'm sitting in the line to talk. And I was like, you know what? I don't remember seeing a Taco Bell when I was in Australia. I remember seeing Burger King, which was it Hungry Jack's?
Hungry Jack's.
And of course, everyone's got McDonald's, but I'm like, I don't think they. Anyway, so that's why I was like, I don't think they have it. Yeah. So it's a busy day, but no, I try to fit in, a run, or I'll do spin bike or I'll do weights. I don't do a lot of hand type stuff anymore. Like I do like assisted pull-ups, because I don't want to put too much pressure on I've noticed that I've over time of playing so much that I need to take better care of my hands. So I any type of really hard grip stuff, I do strengthening stuff and conditioning, but I don't go overboard with it.
It's just interesting because I obviously know how much you work on stage, like both on a playing level and like just a physical exertion of jumping around and going crazy, and like that takes a lot. You can't just expect to be able to do 8 or 10 shows and not do anything to maintain that, and again, like as musicians, like we kind of sometimes think like we got our musical skill set, that's all we have to really worry about. But then when even just, I'm sure you've worked with them too, like musicians in the Cirque band who like they struggle to get through a week of just playing their instrument, sometimes, and not to mention like what you do, with all of the onstage stuff. But yeah, that takes a lot. So I was just curious as to like it's obviously like an intentional thing for you to maintain that.
No, because I look at people my age, that. And I look at them and I'm like, I do it because there's no way I would be able to like do even what I do in this show here, jumping around and like acting crazy on stage. No, there's no way. And every now and then when I feel like, okay, I need to, one thing I didn't mention, and I'll tell drummers this, I do a lot of core work, at least 3 times a week. Because especially drummers, when you're sitting down and you're like hunched over and like, you want to, I notice when I play percussion, I have better posture, but when I play drum set, I get into you know what it is. So I make the hunch, and so I tell people, and when I herniated my back, a doctor, and this is important for all drummers, a doctor was like, like the way we evolved, we weren't supposed to stand, straight, and that we're just putting constant pressure on our spine. And so like, it's one of those things, it's almost like flossing your teeth. Like at an early age, everyone should be taught, like, you need to take care of your core and maintain that strength. So that's something I still do at least 3 times a week. And I even have an inversion table that helps me kind of extend and make sure that I release. So yeah, I that's still a very important part of what I do. But I mean, physically and mentally, like I said, I meditate when I run, because it allows me to exert that energy and get all that negative energy out and just to suss through my thoughts. So, and I don't have to go into a quiet room and do that. I can do that on the street, listening to, some Rage Against the Machine or some, whatever I want to put on. Like, what do I feel like listening today? Do I, whatever.
Yeah. Wow. That's great, man. Wow. Okay. Lot to take away from that. But yeah, I kind of thought that it would be, obviously like a planned thing for you to stay on top of your physical health and mental health. Again, like that's a whole different thing we could talk about, especially the long-term nature of doing those kind of, shows, just staying like in a good place, like mentally, is huge.
No, but, the nature of doing something over and over and expecting a different result is insanity. So like, when you have like these players that you said that have struggle with a hard time in playing, I mean, it's one of those things. Just like, going through the rigor of, it gets mentally daunting, and then like just being able to do 10 shows a week like I do here, and then adding on, outside of show life and like, and then other things that I want to do. Yeah. It's, prioritizing, scheduling, and that's it, man. I know you do, just making sure you schedule things out and make plans and try to stick to them. It's huge. Otherwise you're floating out there in this,
just trying to grab onto anything.
To survive. So, it's just
I want to ask, like, what's reflecting, because you mentioned you're kind of like coming to the end of your time with this specific show, with Cirque. What's been the most enjoyable show to be a part of, and what's been like the most challenging show to be a part of?
So I think I have different like categories of that. Corteo's my baby. It's been 19 years, man. So that, I mean, to do that creation, and I think that was the one that allowed me to most sink myself into like the music. So like in terms of just music, like playing the music, that's probably my most enjoyable show. I mean, because it had really good music, and it did have a lot of incorporation on stage, and we were seeing the entire time. The audience were seating around us, so it was like we had that constant like connection with people. My favorite show to perform was Viva Elvis. Yeah, and it was just you got a chance, didn't you and Amanda?
I did, man. It was so good, so great.
I mean, and it's like it's one of those shows where like, I mean, the band was I think it was the first Cirque show where the band had its own act. We came up and we played Burning Love, and it was just and I remember like when my sub was in covering for me, or on call, that's what we call them in Cirque, sitting out and watching the guys in the band there. And I played percussion that show, and then we had Benoit, who was the drum set player, and we had the guitar, JS and Ollie, the guitar players, Pat on bass, and then we had the horn section with Bruno, JF, and Jason. And I just remember sitting there watching it with my on-call and be like, man, these guys are ridiculous, And that's when it's good when you sit back and you're like, wow, I play with these guys, and it's. So, and we were all around the same age, so we were like a big brotherhood. So I think that is one of the shows, to me, it's very special because of all those layers. Like the band was like on stage like pretty much 90% of the time. We were featured, and we had this bond together where we all played, and we played a lot outside of the shows, and we still keep in touch very like heavily. Like, and a lot of the people are still in Vegas. A lot of the other guys are in Montreal. I remember when I was with Kuza in Paris, I went and saw the guys they were playing with Garou, and it was a cool thing. I think the most challenging has been this one, this show, because one, it happened during the pandemic. So we started creation, and then the pandemic happened, and then we had another creation. So and we're still, the show is, even to this point, still evolving, and this is probably the one show where I'm seen the least, because I'm in a tower and I go on stage for a couple of times. So So I don't have that energy that I feed off people. And for me, that's a huge thing. You know, if it'd be different if, you know, if I was in Vegas doing the same show and I was with my family and whatnot, but like and then the challenges of being away from my family has been another thing because on tour, you know, we're off every 6 or 8 weeks. So I could go back and forth, you know, but here we get 4 weeks off a year. So it's pretty challenging in terms of like a lot of the variables and whatnot. So, so yeah, I mean, Kuza was great, man, because we got to, and like, I still like talk to the guys, and like, you know, it was great because I remember like when we would just like play licks back and forth and like do our little thing.
Yeah,
I mean, it was fun. So I have those special moments and like little bitty things in every show. But yeah, I think Corteo, the music and what I got to play percussively, I think in the all-encompassing show, it was Viva Elvis. Curious was a very special show because I got to do a drum feature that I helped create on stage. But yeah, I think you know that's probably
there's a lot.
ranking.
Yeah,
there's a lot, man.
Yeah.
And then
you like I said, you've been able to put so much into every show. So of course, you know, there's going to be little bits of everything you've done that are going to be favorites. But yeah, I can definitely understand why those would be your pick. Man, Elvis was definitely like for me, like the band was like the best thing about that show. Like it was such a shame it had to close, but you know,
and that's what everyone who came in saw the show. It's like what's the best part of the band, and I'm like and I hated that, but then part of it is like. Yeah.
No, I mean,
but it's but like I said, even taking my stuff out of the equation, watching the other guys play, it's like, God, these guys are freaks, you know?
Yeah.
And just, I remember so when I was with the creation of Curious, a lot of those guys were playing at a place called Bistro Jojo, I don't know, in downtown Montreal. And I told the guys, I was like, hey, after we're done with shows, let's go. And it was me, the cellist, and the violinist. I think maybe the bass player. I can't remember. Anyway, we were like, hey, my buddy Benoit, Pat, and JS are all playing with a couple of things. He's like, let's go catch them. And I remember JS is like his guitar playing. I remember seeing the guys and their mouths were just like, because he was. Right. I mean, he was just doing crazy stuff on the fly, and I'm like,
yeah.
I'm saying he's a freak, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like. The way he can
it's super special, when you get to like share a show long term with musicians you respect so much. That's super cool. Yeah. But I want to kind of tie it up a little bit where, you know, someone comes to see you, you know, say someone saw you in Corteo or even here in Draw to Life and like is super inspired by like you playing all these different instruments and different styles and all of that kind of stuff, just like on a versatility level, thinking like, I want to do that, you know, like someone perhaps like a little bit into their career or into their like learning development, like what advice would you have to someone who just wants to like do everything? You know, you mentioned before about like scheduling time and like going into certain chapters of focus and analysis on different instruments. But yeah, like you say, it can be overwhelming if you are of that mindset and that personality where you just want to be good at everything, you know. Like what advice would you have for someone like that?
Well, first of advice is just know that you're not going to be probably the master of everything. You know, I mean, I am the first to be like, look, you know, I tell people when they like, I got hired a lot for playing drum set, but I don't feel like that's my gig. You know, I love it. I've been doing it since I was a kid, and I still work on it. But that's one of those things. The humility part of like just understand, but that shouldn't stop you to trying to be the master of everything. Your goal should still to be that. Just realize like, you know, it's going to be hard to attain. We talked a little bit before, and these aren't in any order. But definitely prioritize. You know, if there's something like you say, hey, this is what I want to do. And I get that question a lot. Say, hey, Kit, I want to do exactly what you're doing. And I'm like, all right, what are you working on? What are you working on in college? Or what are you working on? It's like, well, this is this. I'm like, again, and people are like, you're a marimba hater. I'm like, I'm not a marimba hater at all. I'm just telling you, And once you get the foundation of like, and I still, I mean, I have Malcat, I have vibes, I play, I can play four mallets, and I love it, but I'm like, I'm not just, once I get the technical skills and stuff like that, and I get, I'm not just like, I understand like, there's not many gigs out there for that. You know, the amount, even an orchestral, and that was the other thing too, man. Like, so when I was a kid, my parents wanted me to be an orchestral percussionist, so I studied with a lot of orchestral people. And when I got older, I realized like that wasn't for me because I wanted to play. You know, I got tired of playing. How many times can I, different ways I can play porgy and bass? You know, or no, I mean, I just got to, you know, Scheherazade. I mean, and but it's there's nothing against, and that's a whole art within itself. But I realized if I want to do this, you know, maybe not doing 8 hours a day or on 4 hours a day on marimba is maybe spend an hour a day, you know, maybe spend 2 hours on drum set, maybe spend another 2 hours on world percussion, you know, prioritize your time so that you're focusing on the things that are going to get you the gigs and to get you work. And those are like the commercial percussion, being able to lock in on drum set, being able to have a good time, all those, everything around those things that to make those things work well, you need to do. The other thing, probably the most important thing is to find someone to help mentor you and guide you to get there, to give you that professional advice. Because there are a lot of times when I was studying different, like we'll go back to tabla, you know, I thought like I play na and I played na like this. And like, no, you know, just getting like, all right, from a true professional and like a guy who's, you know, from India and really like working on your misconceptions. Cause I mean, as much as I want to sit and watch VHS tapes or watch YouTube, you're not gonna, you're going to perceive it as this, but then there's something there's like, no, it looks like that, but this is actually the intention of the motion. And when you apply the intention of the motion of whatever, it completely changes the energy and the sound, and so you gotta get with a teacher who's going to help guide you and mold you with that. And that's about seeking out, you know, all right, who plays this, and it's like finding, and I tell people it's like finding starter people. Like when I started taking drum lessons, I didn't start with the you know the end all be all. There was a guy that got me set on my way, and then I got a lot from him, and then I would go to this other person. I'm also one of these people that I like learning and incorporating a lot of different techniques into my own playing. The one thing I tell my students all the time is there's no right or wrong way of playing a drum. There's absolutely no right or wrong. You know, you get all these people like say, that's not how you play that. I'm like, as long as you can play it consistently and you get the sound that you're intending to get, I have no problem with it. You know, I've seen, you know, I remember going when I was in college, you know, everyone had a big head in college, and you'd see this timpani player, this old guy, and he would come and play, and he looked, and people were like, you know, snickering in the clinic he was giving. But I remember sitting back and I'm like, you guys hear though? I've never heard a roll on timpani just hit me in the face like that, you know? And I'm like, he's getting the sound. It's like, it doesn't matter how he looks, and it's what he's producing is what matters. And like, and when we're recording, I know you do a lot of recording. I do. It's like whatever I'm doing in the studio, no one sees.
Yeah, exactly.
No one's watching me. As long as I'm able to produce that over and over again consistently, and it's the sound that I'm. This is my intention. All right, I'm wanting it to be that. If it's all right, I didn't mean it to be that. All right, then I need to, you know, hone in on my stuff. So, but yeah, finding a teacher that help you find that, and finding teachers that. There's going to be teachers out there that are going to say, no, you have to do it this way, and that's the only way. So you learn from those people, and then you go to this person and said, all right, this is the way. And I mean, we talked about this before. I'm pretty sure in Kuza, it's like my left hand and right hand. I mean, I know when I'm teaching kids a specific thing, that switch in my mind goes, okay, play like I need to demonstrate to them. You know, whether it be like pipe band drumming, or if it's more like American traditional, or like, you know, whatever. I mean, my thing is I'm demonstrating to them. So like, again, that switch flips, and that's the chameleon nature of me learning all these different styles goes into play, where my colors change, and I go to that. Because I mean I don't want to sit there and play one way and be like, no, don't do that. If you're wanting to play pipe band drumming, we don't traditionally don't do that, but you're not doing it. Oh yeah, you're right. But I've there's so many teachers out there that are like, no, that's the wrong way to do it. I was like, no, there's not. There's no right or wrong. There's no, even when you get to traditional instruments, there's the traditional grounded way that, yes, that's how that's played. But man, when I pick up a drum, I can't tell you how many times I've picked up a djembe. I'm looking at it right now, a djembe or a darbuka or whatever. And I'll play it with like more of like a, play djembe with like more of a Middle Eastern technique or, and it gets a different sound. I was jamming on, I have a taiko drum, and I was like, I was just experimenting with my hands. I was like, it sounds like a beefy, thick, frame drum. Or I'm like, but it has this whole character. I'm like, so I'm incorporating this other techniques into that instrument. I'm like, there's no right or wrong way to do that, man. Do it, and that's where again. I still want to honor the tradition by learning and appreciating, but then I'm like, you know what? This is a piece of wood that has a membrane stretched across it. How can I create as many different sounds out of it as I can? And that's what makes it fun. I'll sit and watch. I'll sit and watch football and sit there playing with a drum. And be like, oh, what's that? Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, cool. Oh man, that's huge. Wow, and I think that's it. Like you just, like you once you kind of acquire all these skills, and have respect for the culture and where they came from and the traditional ways of playing. It's what you do with it and how you adapt those techniques for different instruments, and that can spark a completely different kind of way of playing, and that's where development comes from. and
it's like using these things not just for musical reasons, but for listening to people talk and be like and share and like this is what music is, not a one way. I mean, it's like everyone's sharing. You're like, oh really? Okay, because it might be someone can tell you something and it could be a life-changing thing to your playing. Or it'd be something that you've never been exposed to, and it'd be like, wow, that's really cool. Again, I'm gonna take that and put that in my bank of like I can do now. It's people are so close, and I tell this to like my students, and I tell this to other people, like, don't close these off. Be receptive to everything, because you never know like what you'll learn. Being humble and being honest with yourself. Be like, I'm never gonna stop learning stuff. I mean, I'm sure. Yeah. You'll just push some stupid knowledge thing out and put that in,
Yeah, exactly. Make room for it. Yeah.
Useless trivia, thing that you're like, now I have this drum thing, and now
Yeah. Oh man, that's so great. Well, dude, thank you so much for today. There's so much we could keep talking about. I really feel like we should have another chat, but we'll leave it there for today, I think. But where can people find you and follow you and keep in touch with what you're doing?
That's a good question, man. I don't know my exact handles. Everything's pretty much just Kit Chatham, like one word. Okay. So YouTube, It's like, I think it's like Kit Chatham. Instagram is Kit Chatham. My website is kitchatham.com. Don't criticize because I haven't touched it in a while. It's so hard. I mean, it's just keeping up with with everything, and like trying to do it. Like I try to do all that stuff myself. So like, so like Instagram, Kit Chatham, Facebook, Kit Chatham. It might be Kit Chatham Percussion. YouTube, I think it's Kit Chatham or Kit Chatham Percussion. If you type in my name, you'll find me, feel free to reach out. I mean, I love chatting with people and trying to help out the drum cosmos, as much as possible. Because I mean, how else can we help leave our legacy behind without actually help sharing in this this drum community. So
man,
cool,
and you certainly got so much to offer. So thank you so much, man. This has been so great. So much incredible advice and experience and knowledge that I've certainly taken a lot from. I know there's a lot of other guys and girls out there who are going to really appreciate this as well. So thanks so much again, Kit, and we'll speak soon.
All right.